like color blindness and being anti-racist to him growing up not in America and not understanding dogs as a pet. And that analogy, I think, was the most perfect analogy I've heard about like why like saying I'm colorblind can be negative. So yeah, so we'll get into that when we actually get going, but because I want to make sure we hit on that.
Yeah, well, we're already recording and we're already live on YouTube, y'all. So we are here. Yeah, welcome to the Targeted Podcast. We had a little bit of an hiatus. You know, this is not our day jobs. We're not, we have day jobs.
Life happens. Life happens.
Yeah, life happens. It's been a minute. We're fresh, we're ready to go. I'd like to thank BK and Dan for joining us. This is a really important issue, and I'm really excited to get in touch with this. Hopefully, I won't be too much my soapbox today, but no promises.
This is our platform. We can do whatever we want.
Hey, it's your platform. Do what you want with it, right?
Cheers.
Exactly. Yeah. So we get to talk about a huge topic today, and we're talking critical race theory, and it's a doozy. It's a doozy of a topic, and we're all going to share our perspectives. We're all obviously young Black men, some younger than others, that has their own insight on this.
We all look good, though. We all look good.
We all look good. Yes, absolutely.
Trying to get rid of the blue tint on my screen, but yeah, we all look good.
Yeah, we all look good. Some better than others. But
I'll fix that in editing. Don't worry about it. I'll fix that in editing. It's all good.
It's already live on YouTube, so it's already there. I need to rename like the YouTube thing because it says Sahid's Zoom meeting, but whatever. It's fine. All right, let's get started. Critical race theory. So not a whole lot of format today because it's going to be more of an organic conversation, but I do want to get started on what it is, right? Because I'm sure everyone's been in the news about this, seeing in the news a bunch of, let's be honest, angry white people are mad that they teach this in our classes, right? And I think you guys all have children, so I'd love to get your perspective on that as well.
That's why it's so important to me right now. That's why it's important.
And you know what? I'll give you another piece too. Yeah. There are also, I'll say, uninformed angry Black people as well.
Oh yeah.
I've seen. It's funny. So one of the major things that hit the news about critical race theory in schools was the school board meeting out here in Loudoun County. I don't live in Loudoun County, but I'm right next to Loudoun County. My in-laws live in Loudoun County, right? My wife went to high school in Loudoun County. So it's right up the street, and there was a lot of press there. And then there was actually some press in me and Dan's hometown here, not our hometown, but in where we currently live. And it didn't really make the news, but there were a lot of angry people, including Black people, that were in there saying they don't want, because this was about the changing the mission statement and adding equity to it as a part of the critical race theory conversation. And there were at least 2 Black couples or 2 Black families that I saw in there saying that they didn't want their children, being whatever because of the color of their skin. So I think there's a lot of stuff that comes with it on both sides, and a lot of misinterpretation of what it really is. So yeah, let's
dig back at it. So this is what I didn't realize. And after the headlines, to piggyback off what BK was saying, after Loudoun County hit the headlines with a lot of the issues, a lot of the meetings that they were having with the school board and angry parents, hitting back at the school board about critical race theory and indoctrinating their kids into this concept. I looked it up, and it's actually 40 years old.
Yeah.
So
I did not know that. Yeah.
I want to get into that. So what is critical race theory? So it's a series of propositions and policies that was developed by Harvard, right? Yeah. In the 70s and
academic 80s. Scholars and lawyers.
Academic scholars. And it was made
on the back.
Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. In my notes. I love how we all do the same research.
Iron sharp as iron.
Research is solid, right? Because we have the same notes. Right? But it was first started as kind of a legal kind of framework, which suggests that racism is not just is more than just normal, but it's built into our policies, our laws, our infrastructures, right? It explains why there's disproportionately a large amount of Black people in prisons, why Black people get paid less, why Black people tend not to make as much money as their white counterparts, why income inequality is so disproportionate. Reason why more Black people die per percentage wise during the pandemic because lack of access to healthcare, right? So all of those things like kind of encompass kind of critical race theory, and critical race theory is the idea that it's the kind of the framework that studies that in policies and in laws that are made, right? And
So let me pause you right there.
Can we
Like,
pause there? Can we pause there?
who here believes that that's true? Like, is that not an accurate statement? Is that not an accurate statement that is baked into the DNA of the country? It's accurate. It's true.
It's as American as pie, bro.
Yeah, here's the funny thing. These arguments that you see, these arguments that you hear, they're not calling it a lie. Like when they say, I don't want.
That's a fair point. That is a great point.
Yeah, no one's saying it's their lie.
I don't know though. See, I don't know though, right? And so the reason we definitely need to talk about this because what I've seen in the videos, in the one in Loudoun County and the one in Prince William County, and so what I've seen about a lot of the naysayers that are pushing back is it's one of two things. There's a lot of people that either A, don't believe that there's a systemic race problem in America,
or they believe
or B, don't really have an understanding or grasp the reality of what that means. Because there were a lot of people that were standing up saying, like, we don't have a systemic race problem here in America. So there's a lot of people that were pushing back on so he hit it on the nose, like based on the definition and what everyone's been reading, it is the study of race, the relationship between race and the law and the legal system. But people, for whatever reason, do not believe, not everyone, but there's a certain amount of people that do not believe that there is a systemic problem with race here in America. So he hit on a whole bunch of different examples. And the example that I always write down, the one that's so very obviously clear that I don't understand how people try to deny it, is redlining, where the government legitimately drew lines around specific neighborhoods, and then that turned into the banks not giving people loans. Like, so there's so many examples of how laws have been created to affect people based on their race. But for whatever reason, there is a contingent of people that deny that. And I think we're going to continue to have an issue until people either come to grips with, hey, sorry, this is reality, or somehow see the light for themselves. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you're right.
You nailed it. So I cannot tell you how many times I've had discussions of race. I mean, I'm from Louisiana, right? You guys have all experienced, from Louisiana. You guys have all experienced.
My family from Louisiana. Stand up.
Oh, well, what do you know? Look at these guys.
Yeah, my mother's family was from Monroe.
Yeah.
Monroe? Oh, I
was stationed in Shreveport.
Country to the mud. Super.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, look at that. So I worked in North Louisiana for a little bit.
I've been there before.
There's nothing out there.
I went to New Orleans for a wedding.
Look, get out of here, Nicholas. Yeah. No, but me growing up in Louisiana, we talked I like to talk about race, and it's amazing me how hard people work to avoid the topic, right? To not want to discuss it, right? Mm-hmm. I hear this all the time. Well, does it have to be about race? I mean, if you don't talk about it, then it's not a problem. And I think we were joking before the podcast starts, like, not talking about problems don't actually work. I mean, I guess it depends on the problem.
Sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, how'd you put it, Nick? A lot of marriages did really well on that.
Yeah, we're not going to turn this into a marriage counseling session, but just saying, it's important to talk about problems, but I can't tell you how many times I would have a conversation with someone and like the origins of slavery, like how it was taught in school, right? It was taught as the War of Northern Aggression, right? We were taught that Robert E. Lee wasn't as bad as a person, right? I remember arguing with this person. I remember arguing with like a former classmate about this, like over Facebook, because that's what I do. Argue on Facebook because it's pointless. But
I'm also guilty. I'm also guilty.
I've gotten.
I won't argue, but I will post. I will post something that's like antagonizing, and then spit a thing of fact with a meme, and then disappear for 5 hours.
So you argue?
I don't.
I troll.
Nicholas has done once. Nicholas has done it once.
I have.
Yeah. I actually had to have his back on one too. So
yeah.
but yeah, I remember like just going back and forth and this notion that somehow they're wrong. Like they don't want to, they're fragile or just don't want to like see the truth, right? That like the South, the Confederacy fought for slaves. They were rebels. They rebelled against Lincoln when he got elected. That, we want to keep our slaves. We think white man is superior, and that was the basis of what founded the Confederacy. It's
just to double down on that point.
Yeah.
If you get into a conversation with the heritage of Confederate folks, or folks that still believe in or celebrate their heritage, they don't want to admit the fact that the Civil War and the Confederacy was fought over owning slaves, Black people.
Yeah.
People don't want to.
So yeah, I wanted to go back on something. So I wanted to clarify that. Like I feel like what you were saying earlier, Saheed, like how they were fighting the war because they felt like, Black people were less than them and all that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. It was fought for economic reasons, right? Because the South had gotten ridiculously rich off the cotton trade, right?
Off of free labor.
And so, free labor, slavery. I mean, I'm definitely not going to argue that the war wasn't fought over slavery, but I don't want to just say that like they were just mad because, Black people were trying to be liberated because they were less than them. It was still about money. It was still about the money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That was
rooted in their free labor.
Yeah, but to keep them down, to keep that free labor system going, they had these structures, the infrastructure built in to say that, hey, okay, this Black person is property to 3/5 of a person. They baked all this other stuff into how to treat and raise these people so that they would turn on themselves rather than turn on their master. You know what I'm saying? Like that's more of what they were doing.
You see kind of about that today, actually, where people are turning themselves and like, the strategy still works.
Another crazy fact too, real quick, is that I was in some of my research, we were talking about redlining a second ago. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act was just passed like in 2020.
Wow.
Last year.
There is not a systemic problem in America.
Absolutely not.
Clearly.
Yeah. Clearly. No. Next, I did want to add one thing to what you're saying though. In the Confederacy papers of their founding, they did mention superiority to Black men or to the Black race.
Oh, for sure. I mean, definitely not going to disagree that they felt like that, but I feel like the war, they're not going to go to war over that. It was more about that money, that free labor.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
a semantic thing. Because at the end of the day, I think it's the same thing, right? Like you can call it money and free labor, or you can call it over the slaves. At the end of the day, it's like it's still
that's a fair way.
They even want to keep their slavery institution.
Well, the point is that like in school, you're to Saheed's point, like you're kind of just taught that like, hey, like it was Northern aggression, be part of the Union or don't. And then the good old South was like, rebelled and we have to do our own thing or whatever. That's a lie, right?
Oh yeah.
It was about the money.
So do we labor? So I know you wanted. I know you had a point. So I just raised this question because I think this is going to continue to happen as we have this conversation.
Yeah.
But do we want to talk about the history we are taught in school, right? Because a lot of what I was seeing is like on Facebook groups or in these videos is people. I don't want my kids indoctrinated. I want my kids taught history based on facts. Well, if you think that this whitewashed, colonizing, glorifying history that we're taught right now is based on facts, then you're foolish.
Exactly.
This is not based on facts. First off, the fact that I can sit right now in the 8th grade and one of my favorite teachers in all of my school was my 8th grade history teacher. What's up, Mr. Reston? However, I remember he taught me this. Well, he said it as a joke because that's how people remembered it. And like I still remember it to this day. He rapped it in 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Bars.
That's how I remember when Christopher Columbus, quote unquote, discovered America. The fact that that is still a thing, the fact that people get mad if a teacher teaches their child like, well, he didn't actually discover a thing because there were like African people here, there were indigenous people here, so he didn't discover anything. Can we cuss on here?
Oh yeah, we're good.
Okay, he didn't discover shit, is what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And then not just that, but like he was a mass murderer and murdered over 3 million people. So why is he celebrated with a holiday? But yeah, that's what we're taught.
For that. There's actually a reason why Christopher Columbus is celebrated for a holiday. And it's I'll touch on it for like a brief second because I don't want to get away from our critical race theories discussion. So
it's all a part of it though. It's all a part of it.
It is.
Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead and drop that knowledge.
Yeah. So Christopher Columbus was Italian, right? He was actually kicked out of like Italy, and he like was brought to he like went to like Spain.
He was in Barcelona. My wife and I actually saw his house randomly.
Yeah.
In Barcelona.
You should have discovered his kitchen.
Exactly. Point there.
Almost spit out my drink, dog. That was hilarious. Oh my God.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. So yeah. So he went to like was it Ferdinand and Isabella, I believe? Yeah. The king and queen at the time for funding to support to find a way to India. And he fell upon America. So throughout American history, right, we've always had these problems with like race with immigrants coming in like America, and we always come to these problems. So back in like the Italians, that was like they were coming in and people were kind of pushing back against the Italians, that how they're immigrants and whatnot and stuff. So what happened is that like some Italian association wanted to prop up like an individual for a great Italian that helped like serve. It was in service to America. So they chose Christopher Columbus, right? So that's why they brought up Columbus Day and they have actual Columbus Day, and they brought him up as this icon based off things that is not entirely true, right? So you see a lot of people who have strong like Italian heritage that want to like preserve him because he kind of represents. He was probably they're trying to use him to represent some connection or the birth of America, so they can be included within America. So that's why Christopher Columbus is a thing.
The fact that it worked is crazy because people in Spain, when we were talking to the locals, they were like, "F this guy." Like, we don't like him.
It helps that he's white, right? But yeah, I mean, just going back to our critical race theory discussion, like every time we have this discussion about just race and the hard pushback, I was listening to NPR, and the reasoning why we see this is because people want to preserve this idealized version of America that doesn't tell the whole story, right?
Absolutely.
Doesn't tell the whole story. Or
a true story.
Or the true story. Well, the whole story, right? Like they want to talk about the South. They don't want to talk about how the South rebelled. They don't want to talk about how like the reasons for like the Civil War. Every time I talk about, and every time someone, I don't know if you guys hear this too, if like someone wants to try to not sound racist, but denounce like talking about race. They talk about their black friend, right? Have you
Or they say,
Oh, man. Yeah.
No.
Oh my
Or I've dated a black person.
or I don't see color. I don't even think about it.
Oh God, that's my favorite one. That's the
Oh,
one.
see,
that-
I don't see color.
That's
Well,
the
you
one
need
that,
to because it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a friend. So after like the George Floyd situation, and I'm not a really fan. I call him more of acquaintance. But so after like the George Floyd situation, and I do CrossFit as well. The CEO at the time said something like amazingly racist about like the George Floyd situation. I've talked to Nicholas on this podcast about this.
Yep.
He called me up and he was like, yeah, man, I just wanted to talk about this and say I support you. And you know, I listened to this this black coach about the race about this race theory. He's very well spoken. He's like just super well spoken. I'm like, oh,
If you already know, like
There it
we're
is.
going down pet peeves of mine with that.
Yeah. I
Oh,
hate
that's
that.
a pet peeve of mine.
oh my God. I mean, I applaud him for trying a little bit. We're gonna have to kind of
see. So I graduated from Purdue.
okay.
And
Boilermaker.
yeah, boiler up.
Mhm.
And it still happens to this day when that
Mm.
comes up. One of the first reactions I usually get is, "Did you play ball?" I'm like, "No, bitch. I got an engineering degree from a top 10 engineering school. Why would you not imagine that first?" Like, I hate the fact that people's first reaction to me saying I went to Purdue is, "Did I play ball?" Like, no,
Yeah.
I have an engineering degree from an engineering school.
Well,
Stop
BK,
assuming that-
you're athletically built. I
I
mean,
am.
that's
And maybe that's why they asked that question.
yeah, that's
Let me
why
tell
they're
you,
gonna
that's what
ask
it
that.
is.
It is annoying as hell.
That's
That
what it is.
infuriates me to my core.
Hey, just remember, you can only see BK up from the head up, right?
Man, look, don't play me.
Oh, look at
Don't play me, son. Don't play me.
Hey, what is that?
He's like, pandemic didn't get me.
The triple X shirt gonna hide everything, man. Me tell you.
My wife bought it, man. We got matching shirts. She bought the big one.
It's a dope
Otherwise, you
shirt.
know what it be. You know I wear nothing but fitted shirts. My wife bought this.
Damn.
Double X fits you well, my brother.
No, XL all day. Yeah, I feel you on that, man. I am not a fan of, but I mean, but it also that goes to another systemic race issue, and you can tie that back to the wealth gap. You can tie this back to so many things, but why Black people are looked at in a certain way, and it ends up boiling down to like the subconscious of most Americans, Black and white.
Mhm.
That, you know, Black people have either an inferior intellect, or like if they're gonna make it, it's got to be in some type of an athletic or skilled thing. But
Mhm.
for whatever reason, ingrained in both Black and white people, like
Yeah, sell rocks and got a
intellect
wicked
is
jump
not
shot.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say that
Oh,
again.
it's not just this too. It goes globally too, like outside of America. Like, I will say this is probably too much information that you guys I need to share, but you know, whatever. We'll do
We
that.
sharing today.
Yeah, let's get it.
It's just on the internet. It's just for everyone to
Yeah,
see.
we're just live on YouTube. No big deal.
It's just live on YouTube. Yeah.
Tune
No,
in,
I
bro.
remember like, back in the day, this girl had a crush on me, right? This is back when I was living in Louisiana, and she was Asian, and she told me like, "Man, I wish you were either Asian or white," right?
Mm.
And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't like super offended because I don't care about like you can date whoever you want to date, right? Like we all have our preferences, whatever, right? But it almost like people know instinctively that living as a Black man is like living life on hard, playing the game of life on hard mode in a video game, right?
I've never heard it
yeah.
put that way, but I like that.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
being Black in America is like playing the game of life on hard, and being a Black woman in America is like playing the game on like ultra hard, right? Like Mission Impossible mode, right?
Yep.
So, I'm sure a lot of people will probably kind of resent me for that, but it's kind of Just look at the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, like, so again, like when people have an issue with the truth,
Yeah.
you just don't want to see it. Like,
Yeah.
like, you know what? Like saying that black people have it hard doesn't mean that you didn't have it hard as a white dude from X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, you probably had it hard too. However, you didn't have it hard because of the way you look.
Yes.
So like we can have it hard for the same reasons you got it hard, but we also have it hard because of the color of our skin. You don't have it.
So how many of y'all have heard the old like I pulled myself up by my bootstraps argument?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, and it gets really heated. That one,
people get mad because we have affirmative action and things like that. The diversity hires, if anybody's been following the Rachel Nixon situation, right?
That was ended in like 3 years.
And it's like there's a reason why we minorities need these programs, right? Because if we didn't have it, nobody would look at us. They would say, "Oh, that's Mercedes Jackson." Well, next. You know what I'm saying? Like they're just gonna go by the name or something like that, or just assume that, we can't do the job.
So let me get real educational on you for that very specific point, right? So I almost minored in sociology, but I didn't want to take the 2 extra classes. So I took two separate race and ethnic diversity classes in sociology at Purdue, right? And one of them talked about the migration of immigrants into America. So there were 4 different waves, and part of that I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. That argument, every wave when it came over to America had its own challenges that they had to deal with. So the Fighting Irish, right? The Irish were stereotyped as, drunkards that were always fighting people. And that's where the Fighting Irish thing came from. Mm-hmm. And so everyone was discriminated against when they came over from other companies. There's 2 major aspects that argument doesn't actually touch on. The first, really easy for Italians and Irish and these other European denominations to assimilate into. So you all look alike. Yeah, you might have red hair, like have a baby with somebody else. Here's a different color, you're good to go. So it's really easy to assimilate when you're all Caucasoid. We can't assimilate like that because we stand out like a mug. So like that's one of the major things. Like we just couldn't assimilate the same way because we look different. Second piece, like you guys were discriminated against. You guys weren't oppressed for 256 years. You weren't enslaved, and you didn't have another set of laws and things put in place to keep you oppressed after that.
Jim Crow.
Jim Crow. So those 2
programs in the FBI to keep us down and stuff.
Yeah.
But like those 2 factors on top, slavery and then the fact that how we look, well, slavery and oppression, and then how we look, that in itself has made our time of assimilating into America and being equal still in progress today, where it's not an issue for Irish people, it's not an issue for like Italians or other folks that came over in the other first 3 waves. And so people always say that, but like that aspect from a sociological perspective like has to be accounted for. That slavery and oppression for X amount of years and the fact that we look different will inherently make our time to assimilate into society and be counted as equal like just longer. It took every other wave and or ethnicity 4 generations. We are the 4th generation, so our kids are the 5th. So that would be if we didn't have slavery and other things that oppress us. So how many additional generations is that going to cause? No idea. But we've got a lot. We've got a lot.
So let me take it back. Let's come back up to the present day, right? So critical race theory, schools are introducing it. In some areas it passes, in some areas it gets blocked, right? So I guess
there are a number of states.
My question is,
how many schools though? Because from what I'm reading,
there's some like where they're trying.
Like I'm hearing individual teachers in pockets may do it, but it's such a complex theory that it's mainly at the collegiate level, the grad school level at that is what I saw. It's a lot.
As it
The
should be.
majority of it is at the grad school level.
Yeah.
Is at the grad school level.
Yeah. So, but that's the thing is like, when do you and how do you introduce something like that? Like, in my personal opinion, I think that these concepts are something that could be introduced in high school, right? Because then the child is at least old enough to have some critical thinking skills. I think the point is that, you know, instead of just simply teaching critical race theory, they also need to look at like introducing some elements of the truth, just like getting rid of some of the whitewashing in the classes, right? So what do y'all think about that? Like, when is a good idea to introduce these concepts? Do you just teach critical race theory, or is it about, hey, there's some concepts from American history that we need to start introducing here about Jim Crow, about some of the things that aren't taught? Because when you think about it, history class up through maybe 11th grade, it's all the same stuff. If it's world history, you're learning about Rome, you throw in a little bit of Asia. Egypt is all you learn about as far as Africa is concerned. And then everything else is focused on England, Spain, and Italy, right?
Well, yeah, can I add a little bit to Nicholas? So, like, way I've learned it through like history in high school for me was taught all the way up to World War II. And then that's kind of it. You don't really teach history after that.
Kind of yada yada.
Ironically, because they're cutting off. They're cutting off the civil rights movement.
Our 10th grade history class.
For us, we had government class, right?
I
forget what year that was, right? And so that's when you kind of get into how laws work in the country, right? Which is great to kind of give you like an overview, like, hey, this is how a bill is passed, Congress, the Senate, yada, yada, yada. But they don't really get more. Like, they don't give you a little bit more about like the real story behind some of the laws. Like this, that's the point. That's the class I feel like some of this stuff could be taught in, right? Like, they don't teach you how, at least some of the pieces of history where it's like, you look at something like Seneca Village, which was
crazy, right?
A community founded by like freed slaves. I mean, they had, Black businesses, et cetera, et cetera. Bulldozed all that, Central Park. Yeah. But they don't teach you that. They just say Central Park. Hey, it's
Nick,
New York.
I hate to do this, but let me answer your question with a question. Now, my son is 3. He's 3 years old. I can take him outside and he can experience racism tomorrow. Yes. So at 3 years old, if he can experience racism, why is it so harmful for a white child to learn about it?
Yes.
Okay. So
good question.
I agree, right? I don't think it's harmful at all. I guess the question is, at 3 years old, is unfortunately, our children will have to learn about it probably from real life earlier than everyone else. For everyone else to kind of catch up to what our experience is, they need to have developed more here. Whereas for us, we're already telling our kids, hey, I'm sorry, watch out, because Molly them, they're going to touch your hair because blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? We're my kids in daycare are already dealing with that, 3 years old. Why does it feel that way?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I forgot exactly the study that I read this from too, but they did a study of like what's why kids with kids on what they thought started the Civil War, and it was the crap about the war of Northern aggression and the stuff that we talked about earlier. But they also did another study about teachers' comfort level about talking about race in general.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
not comfortable.
Of course, as you can imagine, it's not comfortable. And I mean, that's part of the problem, right? That's why you're seeing these outbursts, like in like Loudoun County and all, how critical race theory is being weaponized, right? To say, oh, I'm not a racist. I don't want to talk about race.
So they talk about indoctrination, right? But here's the kicker is, if these concepts aren't taught in school, where does the child get it from? Their parents, right? So one way or the other, they're being indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking.
Yeah.
And if they can't, if they can't at least get something that's a centrist take on things from school, then hey, if you're Black, you end up thinking one way. If you're white, you end up thinking one way. Everybody, because you, by tradition, by your parents and your parents' life's experiences, that's what you get taught.
Yeah.
Right.
So Nick, I got an answer to your question, or at least I have my take on my answer to your question. So I agree completely as far as like well, I agree with the notion of we should introduce like factual history and Black perspective and other perspective for that matter early in childhood education, if you will. I do think, well, so when do you teach critical race theory as a theory? I don't know if we're there yet because I think it's still very complex. Even though it's 40 years old, it's still a lot of like academia. It's still like a lot of postgraduate, like we got to figure out like what this is and how do we put that into a curriculum for K through 12? Because right now I don't think it's ready for curriculum K through 12. So I don't think to your point, I don't think you teach it as critical race theory in schools in grades K through 12.
Can I add a little bit about that? So the term critical race theory was actually popularized by a conservative activist. I think his name is Christopher Rufo.
Yeah.
He's the one that actually idealized the name of critical race theory. Just kind of like how Republicans or conservatives rather, like they're the ones that came up with the name Obamacare, right?
Yeah.
Because people
twist shit into whatever it is, and then that's how they run with it.
Yeah.
And now it actually kind of flipped on them because people kind of liked Obamacare afterwards. But
because it made sense.
Yeah, because it made sense. But that's kind of what they did. So they're making so this guy Christopher Rufo, he's the one that kind of started banging a drum on like critical race theory and got Trump to sign an executive order about this to ban teaching race equality in the workplace and whatnot. So I don't know about your workplaces, but they're trying to start teaching that now as well. Which I mean, it's good. It's nice that they're doing that, but hopefully they do it with the right intention. That's just not for perception reasons, right? But to actually with the intent of trying to solve problems, because it's no better than saying I have that Black friend if you're doing it that way, right?
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, in my opinion, I feel like you could probably take something like the 1619 Project, which they're also debating about teaching in schools, right?
Yeah.
You could probably turn that into a class, and even if you because they're all essays, right? They're all essays, and there's probably some fact checking that needs to be done, but make that the point of the class. Read this essay, research it.
Let's talk.
What do you find? What did you find?
Yeah.
You feeling this essay?
So that
I haven't read too much about 1619, but like
I read it all.
It's done by the New York Times, and it's been it doesn't need to be fact checked because it's the New York Times. They fact checked this, right? It's won awards and it's kind of been propped as a way to learn about race in America, and people just don't want to talk about it because they don't want to admit that they're like acknowledging racism.
People don't want to talk about it because they don't want to have to explain why their great grandmother is spitting on a Black person in the history book.
Yeah.
Or why the auntie has a Confederate flag hanging up. Why would auntie hang this flag up if it represents slavery? They don't want to have those conversations. So they would rather
or why the woman who accused Emmett Till finally came out like years and years later and said,
"I'm sorry."
Yeah.
So I think there's a way to introduce these concepts smartly, And a part of which is like Nick, you hit this on the head. Like how do we entrench more factual information in what is currently taught in history?
Yeah.
The whitewash teaching that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
So did you all know about this this commission or this committee that was put in place to like green light and stamp all history books before they went to school, and it was literally a committee made of white women?
No,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I gotta find it, but I remember I read this like, wait, what? And that's how these books got turned into teaching whatever it is, like European people.
We get Martin Luther King, we get George Washington Carver, we get Rosa Parks, and then yada yada yada, Barack Obama.
But not only that, but take aside, like the black people and or like lack thereof of what's taught in there. Like the white people that's taught in there are glorified to all hell. And that's not really how a lot of this, like the history we currently learn is not how things went. Take July 4th. We already talked about Columbus Day, right?
Yeah.
Full of shit. Take July 4th. Like the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 2nd. Yeah. And then the following year, somebody was like, oh shoot, maybe we need to celebrate this. And so let's go ahead and do something. But it was the day after. So they
even the map. I remember I watched a Jane Elliott video where she talked about how in the map, like the United States is bigger than a lot of other countries that are people of color. Like that's subtle, but that's still that's some racism
all
right there.
These little things, right?
Yeah.
So like take away the whitewashing glorification of European folk that we currently have in what's taught in history, and teach a more like, so there's a couple ways you can look at it, but like I would say like teach a more like truthful, middle of the road, this is how things really went, and like eliminate the white fragility, because a lot of it is white. A lot of what we have from an opposition perspective on critical race theory is white fragility, and little Johnny over here, we don't want him feeling bad because people are going to look at him crazy because his ancestors did bad things to black people. Well, you cannot.
That's the argument that they make.
And that is the dumbest argument because
I'm crazy.
My kids are going to know that little Johnny's ancestors did that, whether you teach in the school or not. So like white fragility is a thing, and
it is.
And trying to shield kids from the truth because they're fragile is the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Like it's dumb, and it's why people are soft. Like
when the first movie, The Hunger Games, came out, the first movie, and they sent it to theaters. There was this critique that I saw. There was this critique that I saw, and it went viral. This lady complained that the one character named Rue, the death wasn't as significant in the movie as it was in the book because the character was black in the movie. And I think by succumbing to white fragility, this is what you get. You raise these people that are not able to empathize with black people. Like that is the craziest thing to me, that because this character wasn't white and it was a kid, this kid was what, like 14, Saeed? How old was it's a kid.
Oh, she was younger than that.
She was young. She was what? Okay, maybe like 10. A kid dies in a story and it's not sad because the kid was black.
Yeah. No, so it's so funny. So about the Hunger Games, about that too. And I wanted to discuss a little bit, talk a little bit more about what Nick and BK said. But with Hunger Games, right, a lot of people, there was pushback when they found out Rue was black, right? Even though the book, I didn't read the book, but it was described in the book as someone of darker complexion, right? That's not necessarily a tan.
Oh, I thought that's what that meant.
No, we thought she just had some sun.
Yeah.
She was red. She was sunburned.
Yeah. I did want to talk a little bit about what Nick and BK said about like having a centrist or middle of the road view. I think when you're talking facts, there is no such thing as centrist. It's just facts.
It's
right?
just facts.
Like,
No,
Well,
that's fair. Like it's,
I
I don't
said-
want to
so,
go to like
so
this,
you
oh,
can
two
eliminate facts and give certain facts. I'm
It's-
saying present all the facts.
Yeah, well, I said centrist because it's so far skewed in one direction right now, right? George
Yeah,
Washington, the great hero, Thomas Jefferson, the great hero, even though he was having an affair with a 14-year-old, and all these other like things, you know what I mean? But then when our stories are skipped over. So as an example, I recently watched a documentary on Netflix about the impact that we've had on cooking, like American cuisine.
High in the hall.
High on the Hog.
That Joker was
I
fire.
highly
Go
recommend
watch it, people. We're public.
documentary.
Yeah.
So there's a story in there about George Washington and his chef Hercules Posey. Evidently, Hercules Posey was like the most amazing cook. I mean, he did all this stuff for George Washington. George Washington would not go anywhere without this dude. Finally, he finds a way to escape. George Washington, unbeknownst to probably everybody, has a crazy hot temper. I didn't know this, but this is according to what they were saying in the documentary. Crazy hot temper. Basically, is just like puts out the equivalent on a hit on this dude, like find it. You know what I mean? And it was reported that like somebody in New York like finally like said like, hey, he's up here. And then it's like you don't hear from him anymore.
So Nick,
You know what I mean? It's like it's just all these stories. Same thing with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson.
Nick, before you get to Thomas Jefferson, I got 2 points on Hercules Posey that struck me when I heard the story. The one piece that struck me when I heard the story was the fact that there were different slavery rules. So George moved him from spot to spot, from Philly to whatever, Virginia, back to Philly, back to Virginia, to make sure he could keep him enslaved and he wouldn't become free if he stayed in Philadelphia for too long. So I was like, yo, you're full of shit for that, right? So I thought that part was crazy. And then he was known to the world that Martha, or that Mary, whatever his name, his wife,
Martha Washington,
Martha Washington did not cook, right? However, she has X amount of cookbooks to her name because the word on the street is she took Hercules' recipes and couched them as her own.
Yeah,
so
man.
Those are the two things that in that story I was like, yo, this is crazy. So yeah, I had to jump in and give you those 2 points that I took from those.
Yeah, man. And Thomas Jefferson did something similar. Like he had a guy, paid him to be a classically trained French chef, and he's responsible for popularizing like all these dishes here in America. And the only way that Thomas Jefferson would let him go is if he trained his brother.
So even more full of shit. I'm gonna let you free, but that means your brother's gonna be my slave cook and he's gotta stay here with me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And old dude ended up drinking himself to death.
Yeah.
What?
Because of guilt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We can only assume that it's guilt, but word on the street is he drank himself to death.
It's like, man, I would imagine,
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah,
you paid him X amount of dollars to go to France and learn how to be a classically cooked French. And in fact, was it him? Yeah, he was the one that brought macaroni and cheese to America.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he brought macaroni and cheese.
He popularized macaroni and cheese here. And let me see. Oh, that chef, I had to Google this real quick, related to, what's her name? Sally Hemings was the girl he was having an affair with.
Ooh.
Related to her. James Hemings. But again, nothing that these are like crazy interesting stories that here I am, in my 30s, never even heard of any of this before now. Any of these like interesting stories, like the stuff that we were putting out for Black History Month, like all those stories about like guys who stole Confederate, whatever BK, stole Confederate shit.
Oh my God! Oh man!
Right?
I wanted to say it too, but
so, anyways,
but you're speaking truth, Nick. I'm with you completely. I'm definitely with you.
I'm glad that people can't see this foolishness going on in the chat. I'll say that. I can show enough fire back, but I'm gonna let you live.
Well, I have a question for everybody here. Raise your hand if you learned about Black Wall Street as a teenager.
As a teenager? Yeah.
As a teenager.
Oh, hell no.
Okay. I was curious because I definitely didn't. I was curious.
Not until I had to specifically take an African American history class in college, Hampton University.
Yeah, I learned about it in undergrad as well, Purdue University.
I read about it out of college, which is sad. So,
Yeah, I had no idea.
It's just a fact of life.
I heard it and I was like, is that? I had to look it up because I didn't believe it.
Yeah. Just a lot of one of the many stories. On that note, Dan, and Nicholas, we actually shared this on our targeted podcast page weeks ago. The origins of Memorial Day, right?
Black people.
Black people, right? Which made perfect sense, right? Of course, Black people will revere the Union Army that helped set them free, right? So there was a retired, I think, colonel, right? Was it in Ohio somewhere? Where he was speaking about like the origins of.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he was speaking about the origins of Memorial Day, and they cut his mic. They cut his mic when he started talking about the origins of Memorial Day, possibly being started from Black freed slaves, right? And of course, the lady who did this got fired, thankfully. But like, it just kind of shows this fragility of them wanting to preserve this idealized version of America that doesn't tell you the truth, right? Or the full truth. So and she got fired. Thankfully,
I didn't know about that until this year. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Never
So they
even-
said
yeah.
they just found paper, like they just found evidence of that, right? This year.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I know. I found out about that very recently.
Yeah.
I
So
guess
they
that was
found
the truth.
evidence of that this year. That
I don't feel as bad.
the first celebrations of Memorial Day was from Black slaves. Perfect sense. And
If it hadn't been for that incident, I would never have known. Never.
Yeah.
So have you guys heard of the Battle of Bamber Bridge?
No, what's that?
Don't have me in here lying.
This is another thing that I learned about it recently. Not this year, probably over the last couple of years, but this was, I don't even know, this isn't a white fragility thing, but this is another thing that just be interesting for folks to learn, like another true fact of history. But it was during, I think, World War I. There in England, there's Black and white soldiers in England, and we're in the middle of Jim Crow over here. And Black people, everything's separate and equal, or everything's separate here. Black people can't eat at the same place that white people can eat at. But now we're over in England, and Black people are hanging out in bars where they can hang out with white people, and then the American soldiers felt uptight. So this is a point of, like, we do it this way, therefore you need to do it this way. So they're over in England trying to regulate the Black soldiers that are drinking and hanging out in the white bar or in the bars with white people. And so they had the military police come and try to arrest and get the Black soldiers for hanging out in the regular bars. And then the British soldiers stood up and were like, no, they're good here. And then Black soldiers with British soldiers ended up fighting white soldiers and the military police in the middle of like London because white Americans were mad that Black people were drinking with white people in a different country. This happened
Never
in
heard this.
1943.
Never heard this before.
Yeah, it's the Battle of Bamber Bridge. And like maybe 26 people killed or whatever, but they were like legitimately mad that Black people were drinking with white people in another country. This ain't your country. This ain't your rule. Why are you tripping? But that's what they were doing though. So yes, the Battle of Bamber Bridge. I learned about that. I was probably researching something, and that joint came up, and I was like, yo, again, like just facts that need to be taught. And Nick, I think this is the critical part of bringing it all the way back to like teaching facts in school is the reason these facts need to be taught is because it teaches a perspective that kids don't get and understand. And in fact, if these facts are taught, there's a chance that, you know, these people that don't see and understand systemic racism, like they weren't taught these facts.
Right.
So if you teach, you know, little Johnny this fact when he's 8, 9 years old, then he'll be able to empathize with Black people and realize like, yo, stuff is messed up for people in this country that don't look like me. And if you just teach him factual stories that happen, maybe he won't look and say, oh my God, my ancestors were bad, but maybe he'll look and say, we need to do better and make sure that we recognize that these people weren't treated well, so we don't treat people like that. Yeah. That's what these stories and all of these things we're talking about, all that does is give perspective to people. So if you give perspective to these little kids, you can teach it in a way that's not demonizing the oppressor, but it's like, this is what happened.
Yeah, this is what happened.
Yeah, it wasn't
it's
right.
The truth. That's it.
Yo, it's the truth, man. It's like, yo, the first step in fixing any problem is acknowledging it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, and maybe he won't grow up to think that there's not a systemic problem when it really is.
Yeah.
So I think you bring about the facts. You can bring about the facts as early as first grade, in my opinion. In whatever first grade,
kindergarten, you can do it in a way. Yeah. You can do it in a way that is that's tasteful.
It's books out there. They aimed at kids in that age group.
My son has an anti-racist book right now. I hate the book because the drawings are silly. He loves it. Yeah. He teaches babies 10 steps not to be anti-racist, and it rhymes. It sounds like a rap.
And BK, for the audience, how old is your son?
He just turned 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And my daughter's
and he loves his anti-racist book. Baby is anti-racist.
My daughters have books about, you know, hey, my hair is beautiful. I am beautiful. Dark skin is beautiful. Like, just so they know. You know what I'm saying? So here's a question I have for you. This is something I wanted to bring up. So given what's happened over the past, I'll just say 2 years, right? Black Lives Matter, all the police killings that we've seen on camera, all the random racist dust-ups. I'm looking at you, New Jersey. The fool that just got arrested. Do you think that there's a possibility that there will be some overcompensation as a reaction? And the reason why I say that stems from a story that I read a few months ago, wherein basically there was a school that had a committee of kids, and they would basically survey the children to get a feeling of what the environment of the school was like, right? Only Black and brown kids. And they would just say, hey, like, you know, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like things are equal? And they also had something where you could submit something online where, like, if there was an incident or something, let's say somebody hangs a noose outside, you could submit something for that. And there was like a huge uproar about that, basically because, you know, the group was only consisted of minorities. So in my opinion, stuff like that is an overcompensation, right? Like, I can understand if you want to have something where someone can anonymously say, hey, as a Black student here, I feel like this, or as a brown student here, I feel like this. I get that. But to just have a committee consisting of like just certain types of people to report on things, I feel like that's an overcompensation. And I'm wondering if there's going to be like additional things like that to try to say, hey, like, we're sorry for all the stuff that's happened, right? Like, how do you guys feel about stuff like that, the possible overcompensation for some of what we've seen lately?
Yeah, we talked about white guilt being a problem. I mean, white fragility being a problem. White guilt can also be a problem as well. I could totally see that. I definitely remember some celebrity like saying that how she's ashamed to be born white or whatever, and I was like, what? That's
easy.
That misses the point. Right? We don't want you to be ashamed or feel guilty.
All right, come on, now, dramatic.
Yeah, we want you to, like to empathize, right? So I watched this comedian. His name is Andrew Schultz.
Okay, yeah. I rock with that dude.
This guy is hilarious,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things he talks about though is that how, like when we talk about race, or we're trying. So to Nicholas' point about us being overly like apologetic and whatnot, they tend to do like more performative acts and things now, right? Where
Juneteenth, perhaps. Okay.
yeah, Juneteenth more performative instead of like fighting for like racial like equality when it comes to voting, right? Or police reform or whatnot, right? One thing that's more performative is like the use of banning the use of master bedroom, right? Like people don't want to use.
That's a good example.
Master bedroom
It's a
anymore,
great example.
right?
I've heard that.
Yeah, and or people not saying like what Andrew Schultz says is like Black people aren't fragile people. They don't need protection from like Judy or whatever. They need protection from like the police, right? Like that's the problem. It's like people like they have these like performative acts to kind of make themselves feel better, and it's unfortunate, frankly.
So you guys are developers to a degree, right?
Yeah, well, I'm an actual software developer.
Okay, so you're a software developer. So I know like
Yes.
you do system engineering, but like so you're a software developer. So you know when you're developing something, you like you can easily have a master and slave relationship between different components.
Dude, let me tell you right now. So we have like the way we check in code, we check in something called a master branch, right? When we have our architecture for when we use for our, we have something called an EMR cluster, which processes a lot of information, like a lot of file information, right? We have a master like node and 2 slave nodes that the master node delegates to slave nodes, right?
I've had the conversation where people wanted to ban that.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't need to ban that. We need to make sure that Black people are paid equally. How about that? Like instead of getting master bedrooms, how about making sure Black people? So there's actually a story in this, right? That a woman was trying to get appraisal for a house.
I saw that one.
No appraised, right? And then she had like a white proxy, like say the house, or like say this they own the house, and the value appraisal went up, like doubled, right? Like we need to fix that.
We purposely took all of our pictures out of the house when we sold ours because we didn't want any of that. You walked in, you didn't know if it was a Black person or a white person that lived.
Pull all that down, put a picture of the Beatles up, you good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull down my painting of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we need to fix that. We don't need to change like master slave.
Well, on the other side of the spectrum, the organization, I'm not gonna to get into specifics, but the organization that I work for, 3 or 4 days after George Floyd happened, we had an all hands meeting, and this high executive, he started speaking about how he put together these leadership quotes that he thought were very very good, and then it would inspire and encourage people to instill the principles that he thought were good principles for a leader. And some of the leader quotes that he had were taken from some Confederate generals or some Confederate members, and he didn't think about that. And then after that happened, he got on there and he said how he felt that was inappropriate and it was insensitive, and he apologized for it. Now, up until that moment, I had never heard a white man do an all hands meeting and acknowledge something like that. It wasn't like someone made him do that. He apologized because it was something that came out from, it had his signature block on it, and it goes to everybody. He apologized for it. And I was like, man, that was big of him to do that. And I don't know if that George Floyd incident, if that never happens, if we ever have that moment.
Here's the thing though. So my question on that would be, like, hate him or love him for whatever you think he stood for. Robert E. Lee, who was, in my opinion, the best general in the Civil War, who fought for the Confederacy, he was absolutely great at what he did as a general. Yeah. So if he posted something a quote from Robert E. Lee, like
That was
does
one
it
of the people he
invalidate
quoted
him for
from,
what he
yeah.
was fighting for given the times because of like if you see someone like post a Robert E. Lee quote, like and knowing like he was a really great general, would you like completely discredit him and be mad that he posted a Robert E. Lee quote?
Well, I'm going to do what I hate doing,
depends on
but
the
let
quote.
me answer that question with a question. Adolf Hitler was a really great leader.
Thank you. There you go.
And if I use an Adolf Hitler quote,
So I got two things on that. So Adolf Hitler, I don't know if he was a really great leader versus a really great orator. He got a certain team to follow him that then did his dirty work, and then people were scared of him.
that sounds like semantics.
No. So what defines a leader? Because like I can strong on some people to make them follow me, or I can really figure out how to talk to people and get people to follow me and like feel empowered. No one felt empowered with Adolf Hitler. They were scared as hell of him. Two different things.
No, but Hitler was, in terms of a general.
He killed his mother. No, I'm sorry. Stalin killed his mother. Stalin was dirtier than him.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
But I will say this: he did take over like France and whatnot, right? So from a general perspective, like he was doing well until he messed with the wrong countries. He messed with USA, United States. that screwed him, right? As soon as that happened, as soon as the United States went into the war, he was pretty much done, right? Yeah. And then he got screwed by Russian weather, right? But in terms of that, like the war was on his side. So I mean, I struggle with, and this was actually pretty interesting because there was a report that came out that Trump said that Hitler did some pretty good things, right? And I struggle with giving Hitler any props for anything that he's done, right? He needs to be held accountable for the fact that he killed 6 million Jews, right? That happened. And
so I got something for you on Hitler in Germany.
Okay.
German kids in school learn about the Holocaust. Why?
Of course.
So that they can understand it was messed up and understand what not to do. So if they can understand that the Holocaust is bad and understand that this is what German people did, why can't our white people and our white kids learn about like things that our white leaders did that weren't good?
You're making too much sense, BK.
Or still did.
Yeah, I will say even this. This whole so the Confederate flag was more popularized during the Civil Rights movement, right?
Oh yeah.
Like the Confederacy Obama's presidency lasted longer than the Confederacy, right? Like there's so many things that lasted longer.
The statues came up well after the Civil War. Those came up during the Civil Rights movement as well. All of that was like
and they were made on the cheap by mass. That's why they're easy to take down for some of these, right? Mm-hmm. So to your point, Germany taught their kids, and by the way, they banned like the swastika flag. You're not allowed to fly the swastika in Germany, right?
Oh, freedom of speech here, buddy. Freedom of speech.
Yeah, freedom of speech.
Don't take
bullshit, that. Like
freedom of speech.
Freedom.
Yeah. Like Florida just got rid of its Confederate flag or Confederate battle flag in its state flag. Like last year. It's
crazy, man.
Because reasons. Like we can go on and on and on
forever.
And it is infuriating every single time. Yeah. I want to talk. So Dan, you said you served, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know that bases were named after Confederate generals. Like I did not know Fort Hood was named after a Confederate a Confederate general, right?
Or Bragg too, right?
Right. Yeah, a lot of them. There's a lot of Fort Lee somewhere, right? I was in the Air Force, so I didn't learn about that until a lot of our Air Force bases. They don't have those names.
Yeah, I mean,
that was shocking to hear as well.
Yeah, I did not know that until it was pointed out. Like there were plans to make those changes, and then Trump was like, "No, don't change it." Blah 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 blah. Because
a lot of good people on both sides.
Yeah, oh God, don't me start on that. That good people on both sides. I don't see color. whatever BS that you need to tell yourself to, to not
We got
not see
black
the
friends.
truth. Right. I do want to talk one thing too. We're talking about like Jefferson and George Washington and kind of where they were with slavery. Like I definitely believe all Confederate statues should be taken down immediately, right? I'm okay with Lincoln. Well, obviously Lincoln. I'm okay with Washington and Jefferson being stood up because that's not what we didn't erect those statues because of slavery. They erected those statues as founding of this country, and I do think it's important that we take in context the time frame, right? Like we don't like. I will fight tooth and nail against anyone who like wants to like idealize Robert E. Lee or any Confederate general because they fought to kept slaves. Like the way you put it, that's what they did. That's not the case with Jefferson. That's not the case with Washington, even though they were slave owners, right? So you definitely have to take morality of the time. The things that you can say today that you couldn't say, there are things you can't say or do today that was the case 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? We improve as a populace, right? And let's face it, when it came time to the Civil War, those guys were on the wrong side of history. We should not award them for being on the wrong side of history, right?
Right.
So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. I don't know what you guys think about that at all. There was.
I just gave you my 1-2 cents right there. Robert E. Lee was conflicted for whatever it's worth. His ideology and what he wanted to do was fight for the North. However, like he rides with his family, he dies with his family. His family was for the South. They were fighting for the South. So he made a conscious decision to go fight for the South. So
I heard differently, BK. I heard differently. So I heard that Robert E. Lee was a brutal slave master.
So is it? I mean, that could very well be true. So is it Arlington, the house at Arlington National Cemetery, the house like inside of it, where the 2 unknown soldiers? That's Robert E. Lee's house, right?
Is that Lee's house or is that Washington's house? That might be Lee's house.
I think that's Lee's house, and so the reason that
because he got it from Washington, yes.
Because the reason that the cemetery started is because they were mad that he left to go fight for the South, and so the North was like, you know what? We're just gonna dump all of these dead bodies at your house, and that's how the cemetery started. And so he was from the North, or he was living in the North and wanted to fight for the North. His family was in the South. And so he ended up going, and now granted, like this is what I remember learning X amount of years ago. So I'm hoping that all of my facts were right, but I'm pretty sure.
Wait, you said Arlington House?
Yeah, there's a house at Arlington National Cemetery at the top.
I think it's called Vernon.
So there's an Arlington House but it's a memorial to Robert E. Lee, not. I don't think it's his house. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So that might be it. Yeah. So the house at the house is in the National Cemetery. Well, and maybe I caught some folklore, but there's a crib that's at there's a house where they like right where they do the Tomb of an Unknown Soldier and they do all of that at the cemetery. Either that was his crib or maybe that represents his crib. But from what I understood, he had a crib somewhere in Arlington where they were dumping bodies because they were mad that he left to go fight for the South. And that was the origin of the Arlington National Cemetery.
So I'm on the site now, MPS.gov. It says Arlington House is the nation's memorial to Robert E. Lee. It honors him for specific reasons, including his role in promoting peace and reunion after the Civil War. That's kind of the think of it. The next sentence is, in a larger sense, it exists as a place of study and contemplation on the meaning of some of the most difficult aspects of American history: military service, sacrifice, citizenship, duty, loyalty, slavery, and freedom. So I don't think that's his house.
So it might not be his house.
Yeah, but it commemorates him for sure.
What are you gonna miss?
So his house was. They actually fought over his house, and his house was seized during the Civil War. So that wasn't the crib, but his house was actually like fought over, and then the North seized it, did the same thing. So not that crib. So two different facts. So that house is there to memorialize him for the goodness that he did, but then he actually had a house in Arlington that they fought over and seized, and they still did the same thing there. So yeah, so I'm conflating two ideas, but both facts are still true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So swinging the tip. Foul tip. Foul tip. Foul tip.
I love how you're trying to save face here.
Good cleanup. Good cleanup. I like that.
So still not a hit.
I'll take not a hit, but foul tip.
Foul ball. Foul ball. There you go.
Foul ball, exactly. Foul ball.
Yeah. No, but yeah, no. What else you guys think just in general about like some of the statues? Should anything be brought down? Should we learn more about like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson in class, that they were flawed men, right?
Yes. So this is when I say like whitewash, glorified colonizer history, like, okay, respect the founding fathers for what they did in starting it, but also tell the truth about George Washington and tell the truth about Thomas Jefferson and the fact that they owned slaves. Yeah. And talk about how they felt about slaves and and what they put in the Constitution, right? So I think all of that needs to be like talked about when we talk about the history of America. Don't just glorify all of these people and say they're the greatest ever, when there's aspects of history in their lives that should be looked at like, these dudes weren't perfect and don't need to be glorified because they did some messed up stuff.
They're human.
What always tripped me out was that in school, like when you talked about those guys, like the history books always made it a point to tell you how many of their slaves that they freed. Like that was supposed to be a big deal.
How many did they have in the first place?
Right. So they each let go like a handful of slaves, and it was just like and such says let go of 11 slaves. It's like, at the time as a kid, I'm just like, oh wow, that's great. You know what I mean? But now I look at it like, why is that even in there? You know what I'm saying? Like let's talk about why he decided to free those specific people. Let's talk about that.
You guys know that I hated museums until like 3 years ago when I went to the African American Culture Museum.
Yes.
I'm just like, man, I don't care about all these people that don't look like me and I can't relate to. And then I went in there and like, man, I had every emotion known to man. I cried, I laughed.
The Jefferson Memorial was very telling at the National Museum for African American History and Culture.
I'm like, man, this is I think there was one room where they just got "Black is beautiful." I've never seen something like that, just in big letters.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, man.
I've been to that.
So I got a really good example of what I learned. And shout out to Mr. Retzer. I learned this, and I remember it was a shock to a lot of people that we actually learned this. But take Abraham Lincoln. He gets all the credit in the world for freeing the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation.
Okay.
So there's a couple of questions, right? So one question is, does intent matter, or is the action good enough? Because my eighth grade teacher taught this, which was very unpopular at the time, but he taught the fact that Lincoln did not free the slaves out of the kindness of his heart because he thought slavery was immoral, because he still had slaves after the Emancipation Proclamation, right? So, but he freed the slaves specifically to hurt the South to win the Civil War. He wanted to get more soldiers. He wanted them to rebel. He wanted to hurt the South. So he freed the slaves in an attempt to win the war, not to free the slaves. And that's not usually taught.
Yeah.
Mr. Retzer showed us glory.
Yeah, he did too. Yeah, he showed us glory. Yeah. So Mr. Retzer was that dude. I still talk to him today, man.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Man.
I would definitely, but before you comment, I would definitely have the audience go out there and just do some research on Lincoln's meeting with prominent Black leaders of the day. They had some very, very interesting quotes from that meeting. I mean, it definitely wasn't, like BK said, It wasn't about, hey, like we're trying to help y'all out. It was more like,
It wasn't out of here.
can you leave? You know, are you willing to leave the country? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like,
So
it was,
no. So you guys talked about Netflix shows. There's a Netflix show called Men Protect the 14th. Will Smith
yeah.
narrates.
Great
Yeah.
show.
And it,
Great show.
Yeah, it talks specifically about this. Nicholas, you mentioned linking with the black leaders. It talks about him speaking to Frederick Douglass, right?
that
And
was
it kind of leads
yeah.
to BK's point here, in the sense that so when Lincoln like came to be, like the South rebelled because they wanted to like keep their slaves and whatnot. It wasn't the central platform for Lincoln to like for slavery to free slaves until he was like, oh crap, I need soldiers, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of when it was like, yeah, we're gonna free the slaves because we kind of need soldiers, right? He had to be brought around to the idea of like of freeing black freeing black slaves, and even then he didn't think they were equal, right? But again, he was a man of his time, right? So we have to teach these concepts. We need to stop idealizing things and just teach him as human. And I think there's a beauty in that where we grow, right? Because it helps shows our growth, right? From more than 100 years ago, well, 200 years ago. I'm sorry, 250, right? Soon, right? So now, how far we've grown and how far we need to grow, right? These people now that are kind of trying to fight against, like, wanting to speak about race, they're on the wrong side of history. They haven't. They've been around for a while, and we have to overcome them. Like as they have always been overcome, right? In civil rights era, civil war era, we have to overcome. We have to keep overcoming. We have to keep moving forward. So, yeah, that's really all I got. I've said so much. I was gonna share about like things that was happening like Loudoun County, like some of the crap that teachers were saying, but I was like, you know what, I just don't feel like it right now.
Yo, it's a freaking firestorm out there, man. They're in the middle of it. Like, they're making, I mean, CNN, they're making national headlines just over these meetings or whatever. Like, you look at the video, I mean, they're just like, somebody got arrested at one of the meetings.
Oh yeah.
Yelling at the school board and all this other craziness. Yeah. But it's all these people that have these issues, all white, every single one of them. You know what I mean? It's just like,
absolutely.
I'm waiting for the one black person to come and be like, I'm cool with it.
If I went, that's exactly what I would do. I'd be like, hey, I'm gonna do what y'all do. I'm out.
I support this.
Hey, so I did have another question for y'all. Like, nothing big, but have you guys actually read the laws that these states are putting in place? It's kind of scary if you really read them.
What in terms of like voter suppression or?
Yeah, like so what, like some of the laws that they're
voting laws
teach. Like Texas, I just put it in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Texas bans the teaching that slavery and racism are anything other than deviations from, betrayals of, or failures to live up to the authentic founding principles of the United States. That in itself is a bold-faced lie. First,
what?
but like that's what y'all are putting in the law. And look what Oklahoma put: bans the teaching that an individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist.
Individual by the virtue.
But the Oklahoma one gets on something that we didn't talk about with critical race theory, because there is a part in critical race theory that says that like everyone partakes in racist acts in one way or another. Not that they're necessarily racist, but things that they do will inherently contribute to the racist system that we have. And so by teaching that, I might, so like nepotism, like, like my father owns this business, therefore I'm gonna go and like, I'm next in line to get this business, and this business is gonna stay in, that business is gonna stay in X, Y, and Z. Right?
Oh, you breaking up, bro.
So like that, like some helps. Oh, am I losing? No.
You just broke up.
Yeah, I'm not hearing
Can you
BK.
hear me?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, 'cause
I actually shut down my camera.
so can y'all hear me now? Am I back?
Oh man,
You choppy, bro.
I
You're in
guess
slow
the
mo. You're in
What
slow mo.
internet am I on? No, that's terrible. I was going too. I had some fire for you. I had some fire.
BK had his teleprompter rolling. He was good.
I was moving. I had some fire.
They're trying to cancel you, BK. They're trying to cancel you.
Damn.
somebody hacked in. Get this guy out of here.
You're speaking too much truth. Cancel.
Somebody call Google.
Look at this guy.
Stop it.
Damn. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I lost my train of thought at this point.
Great question.
I lost my train of thought, but whatever I was saying was real. There we go. We're gonna go with that.
I'm with you. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we've been at this for an hour, almost an hour and a half. So 5 minutes. I'm assuming some people got to get to bed early. Some older people have to get to bed early. Not looking at
Well, yeah. Some of us have a few more grades than others, so I'm sure those people have to go ahead and get to bed. But let's go ahead and go around.
I'm gonna watch this game.
Let's go ahead and go around real quick. Final comments. Dan, I'll start with you.
Man, it was just it was an honor to be here. I like the fact that we're having this conversation, having this dialogue. I think the more that we have it, it eradicates that ignorance, and there's just need more of it. And we just need more conversations like this, man. So it's always a pleasure to speak with some strong, positive brothers such as yourselves, man. And it was an honor for me to be here.
Thank you, man. We're going to have you on more often, definitely. BK,
flattery to get you everywhere, huh?
All right.
Yeah, so I'll double down, and I definitely appreciate the opportunity. It's always a good time to come on and talk with you brothers, man. I appreciate the opportunity, and as Daniel said, it's always good to be able to speak with like-minded individuals and to be able to have an intelligent conversation that just opens up and changes the way I think about things and makes me think about things in different ways. So I appreciate you all for that. And I'll just end it with, like, we talked about a lot of stuff, and as folks watch this and think about critical race theory and what you think it means, I would just say open up your mind and try to have some empathy that people go through things that you don't go through. And people having a different experience, when they read and are taught history that excludes people that look like them, and when they find out later in life about things in history that are contradictory to what they were taught, like, that has an effect. And so just consider that everyone doesn't have the same experiences that you do, and what you learned in school is not as factual as you think it might have been. And so I think whether you think critical race theory is the answer or not, understand that there's facts out there that we as an American society need to look at and understand so that we can grow together. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, well said. Very beautiful.
Yeah,
very eloquent.
Definitely.
Yeah, my final thoughts is my shirt right here. Pro-black is an anti-white. Nicholas didn't make this joke, but I'll make it for him. Like, I just got this out the dryer, so it has a nice little snug fit into it. Makes me look more buff. So they always make fun of me wearing my medium shirts. So it's great to kind of have like this conversation, and just anyone else, right? Like, it's important to have these conversations, no matter how it's tough to have these conversations sometimes, and that's fair, right? But the more you have them, the more prepared you are for them, right? The more you avoid them, the less prepared you are for them. So it's important to have these conversations, and I look forward to kind of continue dialogue with you guys. So yeah, go Nicholas, sign us off, man.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, I think I just go back and reiterate something that I always say on this show, and that's that you know, you can't rely on just school to get your education right. You have to go out there, you have to get the facts yourself. And I think, you know, as the audience listens to us tell these different stories about Black history, like we could do that because, you know, we've done a little bit of reading. And I hope that, you know, when people watch this, like they get that they have the motivation to go out there and say, let me fact check these guys and see what they're talking about. You know, maybe we're wrong, call us out. But if it makes you go out there and learn something, then, you know, our job is done. And I think that's what critical race theory can kind of lend itself to. Not only can we talk about some of those concepts and why they're important and why they matter, but we can also talk about the introduction of history from multiple perspectives, whether it be, you know, Black, white, Asian, Cuban, Latino, whatever. Like, we need all of that. We need to get all of that history. And as a father, I'm worried. You know what I mean? I watch the news about what's going on in the school system and what they want to do and how angry people are about it. Honestly, I'm about to start going to some school board meetings. And even though I only have like a 3-year-old kid, I'm about to be up in there like y'all are full of shit. You know what I mean? Like, get over your fragile ass egos and get your kids the facts. And you know what I mean? And so, but yeah, I appreciate y'all for coming on. I know it was, you know, we've been out for like 2 weeks or whatever. So, you know, but we're back. We're going to keep on coming, keep on hitting y'all with the good stuff. So, you know, tune in, subscribe, follow, et cetera, et cetera.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Like, follow,
Right.
subscribe.
Yeah, like,
All right, cool.
subscribe.